I lay in the hospital bed, broken and bandaged, while my husband held his mistress's hand. He told me I was a burden. He told me he sold our house. He did not know that hours before the crash, I signed papers for a $96 million inheritance. When his new wife walked in to mock me, she saw my face and screamed. Destiny, my former assistant, backed away in horror. Oh my God, Trevor, she is my former mentor. Drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I would love to know who is part of our community. Have you ever been discarded by the person you built everything with? If you believe retribution never misses its mark, leave a comment with the word justice. The nurse did not look at me as she scribbled on her clipboard, her voice as cold as the tile floor. She explained that the accident had severely damaged my olfactory nerves. Without a highly specialized microneurosurgery, I would lose my sense of smell forever. My gift, my career, my legacy. The cost was $85,000. To anyone else, it was a fortune. To me, it was the price of my soul. I looked at Trevor, waiting for the man I loved to step up. Instead, he adjusted his cufflinks, the metal clinking like a cell door closing. 85,000? He scoffed. His voice was sharp, cutting through the hospital's hum like a razor. For what? So you can keep smelling old libraries and wilted flowers? Grace, be realistic. You are an unemployed historian. You do not have a career. You have a hobby. He leaned over the railing, his breath smelling of expensive gin and mint. My Savile Row suit is worth more than your entire professional contribution to this marriage. I am not wasting capital on a surgery that will not give me a return on investment. Return on investment. That is what I was to him. A line item in a budget he was currently slashing. I lay there, unable to move my legs, but the paralysis in my heart was far deeper. I tried to process how the man who vowed to protect me could sign a paper condemning me to a world without scent. For 5 years, I had been the silent architect of his rise. I was the one who could identify a rare harvest of sandalwood from 500 yards away. I was the one who told him which fragrance houses to buy and which to gut. I supported him when he was a nobody, paying the rent while he studied, and I bought his very first suit. I made him a titan in the world of luxury goods, and now he was calling me an anchor. I had reached out to my sister, Kelly, begging for a place to stay while I recovered. She had laughed, telling me she didn't want Trevor's unlucky leftovers ruining her social standing before blocking my number. My own blood had abandoned me to protect her access to Trevor's high society parties. I kept wondering, what did I ever do wrong? Why did I stay? I realized now that love, for me, had been like a high-end perfume. It starts with beautiful top notes, sweet promises, and a sense of belonging. But slowly, the base notes emerge. In Trevor's case, they were musk, arrogance, and a slow-acting poison that numbed my instincts. It was like a scent that slowly numbs your senses until you cannot tell the difference between fresh air and carbon monoxide. He made me believe that my talent was only valuable if he was the one selling it. He convinced me that I was fragile, that I needed his business mind to survive. I had become a survivor in a prison I helped build, and for years, I did not even notice the bars were made of my own fear. The beeping of the monitor sped up, a furious rhythm of clarity matching my heart. Trevor did not know about the $96 million. He did not know that while he was calculating the depreciation value of our life together, I was holding the deed to his entire future. He thought he was discarding trash. He did not realize he was throwing away the only thing that gave his life any value. The air in the sterile hospital room shifted. A heavy cloud of expensive, cloying perfume filled the space, masking the clinical smell of antiseptic. Destiny walked in, looking like she had just stepped off a runway. Or rather, like someone desperately trying to prove she belonged on one. She was wearing a cream-colored Gucci dress that cost more than my first car, and her hair was styled in glossy waves that bounced with every step. She did not look at me at first. She adjusted her lipstick in the reflection of her phone screen and hit the record button. "Hey guys, welcome back to my channel," she chirped in that fake influencer tone. She flipped the camera, and suddenly my bruised, swollen face was being broadcast to her thousands of followers. Today is about compassion, she lied, her voice pitching up an octave. We are here at the hospital visiting Trevor's ex-wife. He is such a saint for making sure she is comfortable after the marriage ended. She pouted her lips for the lens, feigning a sadness that never reached her eyes. The moment she lowered the phone, the mask slipped instantly. Look at you, Grace, she whispered, her voice sharp and toxic. You look like roadkill. Trevor told me you were pathetic, but this exceeds my expectations. She reached into her handbag and pulled out a small, leather-bound book. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was my scent journal, the collection of every rare formula my family had protected for generations. You know, I almost feel bad for taking the house, she sneered, running a manicured nail over the cover. Almost. But then I remember how good the master bedroom looks with my things in it. She picked up a cup of scalding tea from my bedside table and tilted it with a cruel smirk. Oops, she giggled as the burning liquid soaked into my bandages, the heat searing my skin. Then she pulled a cheap bottle of perfume from her handbag, a 5-pound knockoff, and began spraying it directly over the damp, burning gauze. The chemical scent was thick and suffocating, a calculated insult to my damaged olfactory nerves. From now on, your talent is only worth this much, she laughed. A bargain bin disaster. For a bargain bin woman. Trevor stood by the door, watching her with a look of genuine amusement. To him, this was not cruelty, it was a normalized business transaction. This is the trap of the high net worth sociopath. They do not see people, they see assets and liabilities. Trevor had normalized his own lack of empathy by labeling it as market efficiency. He was not abandoning a wife, he was liquidating a bad investment to secure a more profitable partnership. He believed that for him to fly, he had to cut the dead weight, and his moral compass had been replaced by a balance sheet, where my survival was simply a cost he was no longer willing to incur. The door had barely latched shut behind them before a woman in a stiff gray suit walked in. She held a tablet and tapped the screen with a stylus that made a sharp, irritating sound. Your primary insurance holder has removed you from the policy, effective immediately, she said without looking up. We attempted to run your secondary card, but it was declined for insufficient funds. Trevor arrived an hour later, but not to take me home. He signed the discharge papers, claiming he was moving me to a private rehab center. Instead, he drove me to a desolate bus station on the outskirts of London and dumped me on a cold metal bench. This is your new level, Grace, he sneered, tossing my discharge papers into the mud before speeding away, leaving me shivering in a thin hospital gown like a beggar. Then I heard the roar of an engine. Trevor's sleek black SUV peeled out of the hospital parking garage. He saw me sitting there in the rain. Instead of slowing down, he swerved slightly to the right, closer to the curb. The massive tires hit a deep pothole filled with street sludge. A wall of brown water slammed into me, coating my face, my hair, and my fresh bandages in filth. A taste of motor oil and grit filled my mouth as I watched his taillights disappear around the corner. They thought they had drowned me. They did not know they had just watered the seeds of their own destruction. I sat on the curb for exactly 5 minutes. I did not cry, and I did not scream. I calculated. Trevor thought he had stripped me of everything, but he had missed one thing. I reached into the zippered pocket of my wet handbag, and my fingers closed around cold metal, a single coin so insignificant he had not even bothered to steal it. It was the only thing standing between me and the end of my story. I dragged myself upright, my cast scraping the pavement as I limped toward a shivering delivery driver waiting by his bike. I offered him the heavy gold coin, a rare collector's piece Trevor had dismissed as junk in exchange for a 1-minute call on his smartphone. I slotted the coin in and dialed the number of Marcus Blackwood, the executor of the Aurelian estate. This is Grace, I rasped into the receiver. I am calling to claim my inheritance, and I need help immediately. There was a silence on the other end that lasted a heartbeat too long, then a crisp, professional voice shifted. Mrs. Montgomery, we have your location trace active. Do not move. 10 minutes later, the atmosphere on the street changed. A matte black Maybach limousine glided through the traffic like a predator parting a sea of taxis. Marcus stepped out, holding an umbrella over the filth and the mud. He offered me a gloved hand and looked me in the eye with absolute deference. Allow me to assist you, chairwoman. For the next 6 months, I had to remain a ghost. To the world, Grace had vanished into the shelter system. In reality, I was in a secluded facility in the Cotswolds, undergoing a transformation that was less like recovery and more like a forge. The medical team was not made of hospital interns. They were world-class surgeons flown in from Switzerland. While they rebuilt my nerves with titanium and microscopic precision, I rebuilt my mind. I signed my new name Grace Montgomery and accepted the throne of an empire worth $96 million. The cane was eventually left leaning against a wall, gathering dust. When I finally walked out of those gates, the mousy woman who hid behind oversized cardigans was dead. I sat in a salon chair in London and told them to cut it all off. My hair was now a sharp, angled bob that framed my face like a blade. My wardrobe was no longer bargain bin finds. It was armor-tailored blazers and 4-inch stilettos that clicked against marble with the rhythm of a ticking clock. I stood in my executive suite, looking down at the city. My reflection was cold and imposing. I did not see a victim. I saw a predator. I opened a thick leather folder on my desk, a forensic autopsy of Trevor's life over the last 90 days. He was drowning in debt, living a lie funded by borrowed time. He had taken out high-interest loans to pay for the wedding and the penthouse, borrowing from people who did not care if he lived or died. I looked at Marcus. "Buy it," I said, my voice cutting through the room like a gunshot. "Buy it all." Marcus nodded, tapping his tablet. "Consider it done, chairwoman. We've already mirrored his private servers and placed high-gain microphones in his home study. We have every conversation, every forged practice signature, and every confession recorded. He has been bragging about the fraud to Destiny for weeks, unaware he was speaking directly into our evidence files. This is not an investment. It is an acquisition. Through a shell company named Nemesis Holdings, I quietly bought every promissory note, every mortgage deed, and every line of credit with his signature on it. I was no longer just his ex-wife. I was now his landlord, his banker, and the owner of the very bed he slept in. He thought he was a self-made man, but he was now an employee of Nemesis Holdings, and his performance review was coming up very soon. Marcus did not knock when he entered my office that morning. He walked with a heavy, purposeful stride, carrying a leather-bound folder that looked like a death warrant. He laid it on the mahogany desk and opened it, revealing a series of technical documents and international bank transfers. "He is more desperate than we thought, chairwoman," Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave into a tone of professional disgust. "And he is much more careless." I looked down at the documents. My eyes caught the signature at the bottom of a transfer agreement for the Imperial Rose formula, the crown jewel of my family's olfactory legacy. It was my name, written in a jagged scrawl, but the date on the document made my blood turn to ice. It was dated 5 days after my accident. I had been in a medically induced coma, fighting for every breath, while Trevor was sitting in our study, practicing the tilt of my letter G and the loop of my letter Y. This was not just a betrayal of the heart anymore. It was a crime of the highest order. Trevor had not just stolen our joint savings, he had committed wire fraud and identity theft. He had forged my name to sell my family's intellectual property to a shell company in order to prop up his failing investment fund. He was liquidating my heritage to pay for Destiny's Gucci dresses. I ran my finger over the forged ink. For 5 years, I had been the silent investor in his version of a family, providing the talent and the credibility he lacked. I realize now that our marriage had not been a partnership. It had been a long-term embezzlement scheme. He did not love me. He had spent years studying me like a mark, waiting for the perfect moment to strip the assets and leave the shell behind. My compassion had been a luxury he had overdrafted for years, and now the account was empty. "The forensic handwriting experts have already verified it," Marcus continued, handing me a digital tablet. "It is a perfect match for his personal computer's history. He even looked up tutorials on how to mimic your specific pen pressure." I did not feel the urge to cry. I did not feel the heat of anger. I felt a cold, clinical clarity. This was not revenge. It was accounting. I was simply balancing the ledger. Trevor was preparing a massive launch event, a grand gala at the Savoy to debut the Imperial Rose under his own brand. He thought he was about to become the new king of the luxury world. He believed he had successfully stolen the fire from the gods and was about to sell it back to them. He had no idea that I had already purchased the debt of the very marketing firm he was using. He did not know that the venue had been booked through a subsidiary of Aurelian Holdings. I was letting him build the stage, let him invite the press, and let him buy the most expensive champagne. I wanted him at his highest point of perceived power before the floor gave way. I looked at Marcus and closed the folder. "Let him proceed with the gala," I said, my voice steady and lethal. "I want every investor he has ever lied to in that room. I want the cameras rolling. If he wants a show, we are going to give him a finale he will never forget." The grand ballroom of the Savoy had been transformed into a palace of gold and velvet, a space that did not smell like food or perfume, but like generations of accumulated power. I watched the security monitors as Trevor and Destiny stepped through the heavy oak doors. Destiny was shimmering in a $50,000 custom gown made of spun gold, looking like a disco ball reflecting a desperate plea for attention. Trevor gripped her waist too tightly, his knuckles white, a drowning man holding onto a piece of driftwood that was also on fire. They thought this gala was their salvation. Trevor had spent the last of his stolen capital to secure this stage, hoping to charm one last investor to save his failing fund. He did not know that the floor beneath him was already rigged. As the lights dimmed, the massive LED screen above the stage flickered to life. The generic stock images of Aurelian's charity work suddenly dissolved into digital static. The screen went black for a heartbeat, then snapped on with vertical, shaky smartphone footage. Destiny's face filled the monitor, not the polished influencer at the gala, but the assistant in the hospital room wearing sunglasses indoors. Her voice, amplified by the stadium-quality sound system, boomed across the silent room. "Look at her. She looks like roadkill." A collective gasp rippled through the elite crowd like a shockwave. The video played her cruel, mocking cackle as she poured the scalding tea onto my bandages. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Destiny sat frozen, her face draining of all color as she watched her own cruelty played out in high definition. She was a fly caught in a web she had helped weave. A single drum roll cut through the darkness, vibrating in the floorboards. "Please welcome our chairwoman and CEO, Miss Grace Aurelian Montgomery," the announcer boomed. A blinding white spotlight hit the top of the marble staircase, and there I stood. I was a vision of calculated perfection in a midnight blue silk gown that flowed like water. I began to descend the stairs, my spine reinforced by titanium and sheer will. I carried a silver-inlaid ebony walking stick, not because I needed it, but as a scepter of the empire I now commanded. Click, click, click. The sound of my heels on the marble was the only sound in the room. I saw the moment recognition hit Trevor. He squinted through the glare, his knees buckling as he tried to reconcile the broken wife he left for dead with the Titan walking toward him. Destiny's mouth hung open, a wet, ragged sound of pure terror escaping her throat as she realized the woman she had called a nobody was the owner of the very brand she was desperate to represent. I reached the podium and locked eyes with Trevor. "I apologize for the interruption," I said, my voice cold and smooth. "It seems we had some uninvited ghosts trying to crash the party." Trevor took a staggering step forward, his arrogance replaced by cognitive dissonance. "You are a fraud," he screamed, his voice carrying the desperate plea of a madman. "I know what you are worth. You are worth nothing." "You are mistaken," I replied coolly. "Grace Vance is dead. I am Grace Montgomery, and the only person in this room who is worth nothing is you. You signed a contract with Layla, Destiny, the flagship luxury brand of my family's empire, Aurelian Holdings. It is a contract with a very specific morality clause. Standing here tonight, wearing the jewels you will never own, I do not see an ambassador. I see a liability." I gestured to the screen where the hospital video was frozen on her malice. "As of this moment, your contract is null and void. The morality clause triggers an immediate clawback of every cent paid to you, plus damages for reputational harm that will keep you in debt for the rest of your natural life." Destiny collapsed onto the parquet floor, her $50,000 dress pulling around her like a shroud of failure. She finally understood that the necklace I wore was not just jewelry, it was a collar, and I was the one holding the leash. The silence that followed my announcement did not last long. It was shattered by the heavy, rhythmic thud of boots on the marble floor. A group of men in navy blue windbreakers, Scotland Yard's Financial Crimes Division, parted the crowd of stunned socialites like a ship cutting through ice. The lead officer did not offer a handshake. He pulled a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt, the metal catching the light of the chandeliers in a cold, stark contrast to the diamonds in the room. "Trevor Vance," he barked, his voice cutting through Trevor's whimpers. "You are under arrest for tax evasion, wire fraud, and aggravated identity theft. We have the recording of your confession regarding the forgery of your ex-wife's signature." The click of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was the loudest sound in the world. Trevor's eyes bulged as he looked from the agent to me, realizing that our encounter in the hospital had not been a surrender, it had been a sting operation. Panic overrode his dignity. He began to thrash, pointing a handcuffed finger at Destiny, who was still weeping on the floor. "It was not me," he screamed, spittle flying from his mouth. "She made me do it. She needed the money. She is the predator here. Arrest her." Destiny stopped crying and her head snapped up, her shock morphing instantly into a feral rage. She scrambled to her feet, her $50,000 dress tearing under her heels as she lunged at him, her manicured nails aiming for his eyes. I watched them disappear through the double doors, leaving behind a trail of torn fabric and shattered dignity. The trash had finally been taken out. 3 months have passed since that night. Justice, it turns out, is a slow, grinding process that crushes everything in its path. Trevor is now inmate number 74,902. He did not adjust well to his new reality. He made the mistake of trying to network in the prison cafeteria, explaining the concept of alpha mentality to a man serving a life sentence. He is now in protective custody with a fractured jaw and 2 broken ribs, trapped alone with the one person he hates most, himself. I have come to understand that Trevor suffered from the illusory power of the empty wallet. His entire identity was a rented position, a shell built on borrowed money and stolen prestige. When the capital vanished, his personality collapsed because there was no character beneath the Savile Row suit. He was never a titan. He was just a jester dancing on a trapdoor. Destiny's fall was even more clinical. The morality clause violation triggered a cascading ban across every major social media platform. She has lost her voice and her digital echo chamber. Last I heard, she was wearing a gray uniform, scrubbing the floors of a raw perfume distillery. Every floor she mops is a tiny deposit into the $25 million debt she will be paying me for the rest of her life. Then there was my sister, Kelly. She sent me a handwritten letter full of tear-stained excuses and pleas for her daughter's tuition. I did not feel anger, and I did not feel sadness. I wrote a check for $5,000, the exact amount she tried to extort from me, but I made it payable directly to the school. I told her never to write to me again. She made her choice, and I have made mine. I stood on the bridge over the Thames recently, the wind carrying the scent of damp earth and turning leaves. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my old wedding ring, a thin, scratched band of gold that I had worn for 5 years of thankless servitude. I held it out over the rushing water. It looked so insignificant against the backdrop of the vast river. I opened my hand. I did not watch it fall, and I did not need to see the splash. I just felt the weight lift from my soul the moment it left my skin. Looking back, I have realized that true power does not need to scream to be heard. Trevor and Destiny were loud, flaunting what they did not possess and clamoring for attention. I chose to operate in the shadows, proving that silence is not passivity, it is strategy. If you find yourself in a similar situation, remember that you do not have to win the shouting match. You just have to own the paper the lies are written on. Forgiveness is not always for the other person. Sometimes it is just the only way to set yourself free. But setting yourself free often requires the courage to walk away from those who will never see your worth. My journey was not just about revenge. It was about reclaiming the narrative of my own life. The world is mine now, and for the first time, the future is unwritten. If this story of resilience moved you, please hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to find their strength today. Do not ever let someone else define your value. Subscribe to join our community and follow more journeys where justice finally finds its mark. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Let me know in the comments below.